Dakota Territory, 1882. Dust blew through town like a tired prayer. Heat shimmered on the boardwalks, and the flies had their way with anything that didn't move. Noon bells were only a memory here. The sun did all the telling, and right then it told of trouble raiding in from the west. The saloon doors slammed open so hard they near leapt off their hinges. Every glass on the rails sang in a hard little chorus. 5 riders had come in laughing, hard, showy laughter that wanted to be seen more than heard. Spurs rang. A poker hand folded without a word. The piano man let his fingers fail and stared at the floor. They wore dust like a second coat and pride like a third. The tall one with a wolf-pelt shoulder drape leaned at the bar and thumped his hat down, the kind of thump that says the room belongs to him now. "Whiskey," he told the barkeep, "and plenty. We're here to hunt a ghost." No one asked which ghost. Everyone knew who they meant. The quiet trapper from the high country. The man who came down twice a month with furs and silence, traded fair, paid in coin that didn't jingle because it never lasted long in his pocket. He'd sit alone near the window, a chair nobody else took, and he would look at his hands like they held the last of his words. The gang turned to that empty chair and grinned as if it had answered them back. The wolf-draped one nudged it with his boot. "So this is where the Prince of Powder sits." A miner with a salt beard cleared his throat. "He ain't a prince, stranger. Just a man who keeps to himself." Another outlaw, freckled and young, puffed up his chest and spit. "A man who traps wolves don't scare me." It was a line meant to be heard, and it was. The room held its breath. The barkeep, who had seen men die for less, wiped the rail with a cloth that just moved the dust around. He didn't look up. The pianoman found one timid note and let it die. The town sheriff came and slowed through the side door, as if sound itself might spook a gun. He was a compact man with gray at his temples and a way of standing that added inches. He wore his badge like a promise rather than a boast. He stopped just short of the wolf-pelt shoulder and said, "Quiet. You boys looking to dig your own graves or just borrowing a shovel?" The tall one showed teeth that didn't know the word mercy. "We're looking to pull down a legend." "Legends fall like any other," another outlaw added. "All it takes is daylight and a steady hand." "Careful, boys. Wolves run silent till they kill," the sheriff said. He didn't blink. He didn't move his hand to his holster either. He just let the sentence settle where it wanted. "What's his name?" asked a freckled kid. He made it sound like he needed a reason to carve something on a headboard later. "Name's got a way of not saving a man," the sheriff said. "Yours won't save you, neither." The tall one laughed then, loud enough for the street to hear. "We are the Dorsey Riders," he called as if the sky needed to know it. "We don't ask twice and we don't shoot twice." His eyes flicked to the empty chair. "Tell your mountain rat we're in town. Tell him the hills ain't high enough to hide his pride." A seamstress in a blue dress gathered her mending and hid her stitches with trembling hands. An old longshore sort with a crooked ear muttered, "He don't miss because he don't shoot twice." A cowhand nodded like a churchgoer at sermon. The gang mocked that empty chair as if it had insulted their mothers. One sat in it and sprawled like a cat in stolen milk. Another drummed his fingers on the table, a lazy tattoo that dared anyone to speak. No one did. The trapper's chair wasn't sacred, not exactly. It just belonged to a man who had no interest in belonging anywhere else. The sheriff said, "Drink your drink and ride out. We don't trade blood for sport here." The tall one leaned close enough the sheriff could smell trail dust and gun oil. "Sport? No. This here's business. We heard it said your ghost up there in the pines never misses. If that's true, we'll see it done in daylight. If it's a lie, we'll bury it with him." The barkeep slid a bottle down the rail and caught it before it fell. "You want to see a man shoot? Go to a fair." "We brought our own fair," the freckled kid bragged. "We're building it out back of the livery. Folks can come watch a mountain fox lose his tail." A laugh went up, rough and careless. The sheriff let it pass like a bad wind. "Leave him be," he said. "You don't want what comes." "Marshal," the tall one chided, "we're teaching your town a new kind of prayer. It starts with a shot and ends with a hymn." He put down coin for the bottle, then more coin on top, as if money could make a threat clean. The barkeep didn't touch it. He wasn't afraid to. He just didn't want to. Fear and wanting are cousins, and neither made him free. Outside, the street went on pretending to be a street, wagon wheels cutting ruts, a stray dog scouting a pie tin, he piling on roofs. A school bell clanged once in the next block, then thought better of it. The Dorsey rider sauntered out and nailed a scrap of paper to the hitch post in front of the saloon. The freckled one made a show of tapping each nail true. "So even the blind can read it," he said. Folks gathered in a half circle, their shadows making a broken fan on the road. The notice was short, the way dev notices are. "Sundown. At the dry creek bed. Bring your old rifle. Come alone or we make you alone." A murmur ran through the crowd like water through gravel. The old miner whispered, "Dry Creek's open ground. No cover. They mean to turn him into a story kids tell wrong." A woman with flour on her hands, apron still tied, spoke to no one and everyone. "He always pays in full. He don't haggle. He fixes shutters that don't hang straight and don't charge for it. He's never asked a thing from any of us." Her voice trembled at the end. "Except to be left alone." The sheriff pulled the notice free, folded it once, and slid it into his vest. Then he turned to the men who'd watched the nailing like they'd watched their own names hammered up there. "You don't have to stare," he said. "Go on back to work. This town has a way of feeding itself if the hands don't freeze." He paused, then softer. "Someone ride the creek trail. Put the word in the pines. He can do what he wants with it." No one moved. Then a thin cowhand with a sunburned nose jolted as if kicked by a thought, and went for his horse. He didn't need to be told twice. The notion of climbing that ridge with a message felt like walking into rain with your hat off. But some things a man does because he lives in a place and the place lives in him. Back in the saloon, the pianoman tried for a tune and found none. The barkeep finally took the outlaw money and put it in a jar he kept for bad luck, not for change. The room had gone quiet in the way of a church before a funeral. The sheriff stood alone with his hat in his hands and looked at that empty chair. People said the trapper chose it because the windows showed him the hill line he trusted. Others said he could see the reflection of the room in the glass, and that kept the back of his head safe. Maybe both were true. Maybe a man who lives with winter learns to double every truth. He spoke into the hush because silence can smother a town if you let it. "He ain't a ghost," he said. "He's flesh and bone like the rest of us. He bleeds. He hurts. He's buried things I hope you never have to." The sheriff put his hat back on. "But he counts wind like other men count coins." He looked at the door where the outlaws had gone and added, almost to himself, "And some debts get paid in weather." The sun dipped low, setting the canyon wall on fire with amber light. Wind curled through the brush, carrying dust and the scent of juniper. Silence stretched across Deadwood Gulch like a taut rope. Nothing moved, nothing dared. Then he came. From the edge of the canyon, he walked with the quiet weight of someone who'd long ago traded comfort for solitude. His coat was worn raw at the cuffs. His boots, cracked and sun-stained, stepped with purpose over shale and root. His face was carved by wind and years, sharp cheekbones, eyes like flint. On his back, slung loose but ready, was a rifle older than most of the men who feared it. The town had waited. Now it watched. A murmur slid through the gathered folk on the ridge trail. Children were pulled closer to skirts. Men squinted. Women held breath without knowing why. He didn't glance at them. He didn't need to. They weren't why he'd come. He kept walking until he stood at the creek bed, or where it used to be before the river gave up and left. All that remained was dust and scattered stone, a boneyard of forgotten water. There, in the open, stood the Dorsey gang, 6 strong now, leather creaking, mouths curled in smirks. Their leader, the tall one with the wolf pelt, stepped forward and spat at the dirt. "Well, I'll be," he drawled. "The ghost comes crawling out of the timber after all." The man didn't answer. He just unslung the rifle and held it lightly in one hand. The barrel caught the last light like an old sword, the wood worn pale where fingers had gripped it too many winters to count. "Thought he'd be taller," the freckled outlaw sneered. "That old gun's worth more than 10 of you," Elias Boone said, voice quiet, voice dry. It landed like a nail on glass. So that was his name. Elias Boone. The townsfolk whispered it like a secret coming back from the grave. They remembered now. The stories. The sightings. The man who once hunted elk at 600 yards in the Rockies, who could drop a silver dollar from a fence post without blinking. They said he'd fought wolves hand to throat, and not all the wolves had been on 4 legs. They said he had buried his wife and child with his bare hands after raiders took all but his life and left the cabin burning behind them. After that, he vanished into the high country with only his rifle and the silence. "You sure that rusted stick still fires?" one of the gang jeered. Elias didn't look at him. "A wolf don't need new teeth to kill." The gang laughed. Loud, loose, hungry. The kind of laughter men wear when they want to hide what's rising in their bellies. The tall one, Caleb Dorsey, took a step forward and pointed toward a fence rail where a whiskey bottle balanced, dark and full beneath the sky. "There," he said. "Let's see this legend in action. One shot. You hit it. Maybe we take you serious." Elias looked at the bottle. He didn't move for a long moment. The wind caught his coat, flaring it slightly behind him like a flag torn free. Then he lifted the rifle. The barrel rose smooth, steady, slow, not with hesitation, but precision. Every man there watched his hands. Even the ones who claimed not to believe in ghosts felt a tickle on their necks. Elias brought the iron sight to his eye. The wind shifted. Dust whispered past his boots. He didn't blink. Then, he lowered the rifle. No shot. No sound. The outlaws hooted with delight. "Guess the trapper's gone soft," one of them crowed. "Maybe that old rifle's just for walking sticks now," another spat. Elias turned. No words, no glare. Just turned, calm as dusk itself, and began to walk away. Behind him, the laughter exploded. Boots stomped. Hats slapped thighs. Dorsey barked through a grin. Guess the stories were just bedtime tales. Then, the sound. Crack. Not loud. Not desperate. Just one clean note in the still air. A heartbeat passed before the bottle shattered. Not toppled. Shattered. Glass sprayed like sparks across the dust. The echo of the shot rolled through the canyon like a sermon from God himself. The laughter died mid-throat. Every head snapped toward Elias. He hadn't turned around. He hadn't slowed. He just kept walking toward the far edge of the creek bed like the world owed him nothing, and he expected nothing in return. The freckled one stared at the bottle's remains, mouth parted. But he didn't even. Caleb Dorsey's smile withered into something meaner. He didn't need to. Took the shot with his back turned. A boy up on the ridge whispered, "How'd he know where it'd be?" No one answered. Behind Elias, the gang watched him fade into twilight like the last line of a story they couldn't rewrite. His boots left no prints they could follow. The canyon swallowed his shadow. Back at the saloon, the talk changed. They spoke softer now. They remembered, and the wind carried his name like smoke curling above a dying fire. Elias Boone. The man who never fired twice, because he never had to. The cabin stood like a scar on the mountainside, half swallowed by the pines and shadow. It wasn't much to look at, just logs, stone, and the stubble wool of a man who wanted to be forgotten. Smoke curled lazy from the chimney. Inside, the air held the scent of pine pitch, gun oil, and a silence so thick it felt like a second skin. Elias Boone moved with the weight of memory. He poured water from a kettle into a tin cup, his hand steady despite the ache in his shoulder. The shot yesterday had taken something out of him, not in aim, but in breath. Steering the ghosts at a cost. He hadn't touched that rifle in months, hadn't spoken his name in longer. But now the wind smelled like war again. A knock at the door. Not loud. Measured. He opened it slow. Rebecca Dalton stood there, cheeks flushed from the climb, her shawl clinging to her shoulders. In her hands, a satchel of bread, salt, dried meat. Her eyes flicked past him into the cabin, as if hoping to find something more than shadows. "I brought the supplies," she said, voice gentle but strained. Elias nodded once. He stepped aside. She entered quietly, set the bag down on the table. Her hands lingered on it a moment longer than needed. He watched her, eyes shaded beneath his brow. "You didn't have to come this far." "I owed you," she said, "and someone needed to warn you." She turned to face him fully then, fingers gripping her shawl. "They're not here for a duel. That was just to draw you out. Caleb Dorsey, he wants the whole town." Elias's jaw tightened. "What for?" "Ain't got much. Deadwood's got water rights, timber, and no one to fight hard enough to matter." She took a breath. "Except you." He looked past her, toward the window. Trees shifted in the wind like old soldiers nodding in their sleep. "You ever shoot a hawk out the sky?" she asked suddenly. He blinked, surprised. "Once. I saw it. 4 years ago. It had a rabbit in its claws. You were by the ridge trail. One shot. Clean." She smiled, faint and fleeting. "That's when I knew you weren't just a man hiding from a world. You were a man the world should be afraid to disturb." He said nothing, just poured her a cup from the kettle and set it gently on the table. She said, wrapping her fingers around the warmth. They're moving fast. I overheard Caleb say he's bringing more men from Butte. Wants to burn the place clean and rebuild it under his own flag. Elias pulled a bundle of rawhide from a chest, set it on the table. It unraveled into a dozen steel traps, small and wicked. Rebecca eyed them. You setting snares? Always do. Thought you just used bullets. His voice was a dry rasp. Bullets make noise. Traps, they think for you while you sleep. She stared at him, a question flickering in her expression. He met her gaze. I wasn't always a trapper. I know. He moved to the hearth, picked up a fire-hardened length of wood, and carved at it with a hunting knife. I learned from men who fought down south. Mexican War. Rugged folk, rougher than bark. They taught me patience and cruelty. How to cut a trail so no one follows. How to survive when the wolves outnumber the firewood. He turned the stick in his hand. They also taught me this. You don't win by firing first. You win by firing last. Rebecca shivered, not from the cold. We're not built for war anymore. We're farmers, mothers, shopkeepers. If he comes for us, you'll stand, he said. Because folks like Dorsey think fear is the same thing as power. But they bleed like anyone. And they never see the wire hidden in the leaves. Outside, wind knocked a pine cone from a high bough. It hit the roof with a dry thump. She stood slowly, wrapping her shawl tight. Thank you for coming yesterday, even if you didn't stay. He followed her to the door, opened it. The light was dimming, gold fading to gray. You go straight down the trail, he said. No stops. She nodded, stepping out. But before she left, she turned back. Elias, if you don't come down again, I just want you to know. I'll come, he said, eyes sharp on the trees. One way or another. She disappeared down the trail, swallowed by needles and shadow. The night settled fast after that. Elias worked in silence. He set snares along the lower ridge, built deadfalls of stone near the waterline. He oiled the rifle slow, like it was a ritual older than language. His hands moved with memory, not thought. Every groove, every notch in the stock held a piece of his soul. When the moon rose, it found him outside the cabin, staring north. He didn't sleep that night. By morning, the first signs came. Hoofprints near the creek. A broken gate in town. A store window shattered not for theft, just to show they could. Smoke curled up from a blacksmith's barn, doused before it caught. They were poking the ribs of the town, waiting to see if it still had a spine. Elias came down at dawn. Walked straight to the sheriff's office. Laid a rolled map on the desk. Mark where the buildings lie. Where the roads bend. Sheriff Dobbs stared at the old parchment. What's this for? Defense. Hell, Boone, we can't hold off 20 men. Elias looked at him like stone. Then we don't hold. We bleed 'em until they crawl. Before Dobbs could answer, a boy ran in, breath itching in his throat. They took. He fell to his knees, panting. Rebecca burst through the door a moment later, eyes wide, face pale. Matthew, she gasped. They took my son. The sheriff stood so fast his chair tipped. Where? Elias asked. The old feed barn, the boy gasped. They grabbed him near the mill. He said they had a message. Elias's hands curled into fists. Rebecca held out a crumpled piece of paper, dirt-smeared, stained with something dark. Elias unfolded it. Bring your old rifle, trapper, or the boy dies. Sundown. The canyon. His fingers gripped the note like it might burn through the skin. He said nothing, but his eyes, cold as river ice, told the story. This wasn't a fight anymore. It was a hunt. Dawn broke slow, pale as bone. The canyon held its breath, shadows lingering like ghosts reluctant to leave. A thin wind curled through the sandstone walls, whispering through crevices and carrying the scent of dust, gunpowder, and fear. At the canyon's throat, the Dorsey gang stood bold and waiting. Their horses were tied off behind a bend, rifles slung casual, cocky grins painted on faces that didn't yet know their own eulogies. They tied the boy to a splintered fence post driven deep into the dirt. His wrists bled where rope had rubbed them raw. His face was streaked with tears he hadn't wanted to shed. Caleb Dorsey stood nearest him, arms crossed, the wolf pelt draped over his shoulder like a crown. The pistols at his sides gleamed dull in the morning haze. His eyes scanned the rim of the canyon with slow satisfaction. He'll come, he said. Men like Boone always do when it's a child. A freckled outlaw chuckled, tossing pebbles at the boy's boots. You think he brought that antique with him again? I heard it groans louder than it fires. Doesn't matter, Dorsey replied. We don't need the bullet. We need the myth to die. Higher up the slope, half-veiled in pine shadow and rock, Elias moved. He hadn't come alone, not really. He'd brought silence, traps, and every grim piece of knowledge the mountain had ever taught him. In the hour before dawn, he crouched in the dust, fingers busy with wire and tripline, burying loops of iron teeth beneath brush, setting a deadfall of stacked stone over the ridge where retreat might seem safe. Now, crouched behind a jagged outcrop, he exhaled long and slow. The boy's voice cracked against the walls of the canyon. Mr. Boone. Dorsey raised a pistol and fired one shot into the air. Come out, trapper. His voice echoed, bouncing like a thrown rock. Ain't no glory in hiding when a boy's life hangs on your courage. A long pause followed. Then the echo of boots on stone. Every head turned. Elias Boone stepped into the clearing. He wore no coat, just a faded linen shirt and leather vest. His rifle was slung across one shoulder, his left hand resting near the strap, right hand relaxed near his side. His face held no anger, no fear, just stillness. The kind that comes after the worst has already happened and death no longer frightens a man who has buried too much. I ain't here to play fair, he said, voice like gravel stirred in water. Wolves never do. Dorsey's smile curled. Well, well. The trapper finally leaves his hole. Elias's eyes flicked once to the boy. The ropes, the blood, the tremble. He looked back at Dorsey. One bullet, one breath, he said. That's all a man needs. The freckled outlaw snorted. Big words for a relic. Elias moved fast. The rifle came up, not with a jerky panic of fear but with the smooth grace of years etched into bone. Before anyone could draw breath, a shot cracked. A second later, the freckled outlaw dropped, a whole dead center in his chest, eyes wide in sudden understanding. He hit the dirt without a sound. Everything exploded. Dorsey roared. His men scattered, drawing steel, shouting curses. Elias dove behind a rock, his rifle already reloaded, boots kicking dust. Another shot. A second man screamed. His leg caught in the wire snare Elias had set earlier. The hidden loop yanked tight, pulling him off balance, then dragging him across shale into a stack of brush that triggered a falling log, crushing his shoulder with a sickening crunch. The canyon was chaos now. Gunfire echoed off the walls in deafening bursts. Elias moved low, fast, ducking behind fallen logs, pausing only to fire with precision honed by years in the wild. He wasn't just fighting. He was hunting. A third outlaw circled wide, trying to flank him. Elias anticipated it. A hidden tripline snapped taut. The men stumbled forward and caught a bullet between the ribs before he hit the ground. The boy sobbed against a post, dirt clouding his view. Smoke blurred the world. Bullets hissed past him, but none found their mark. And still Elias moved, like smoke with a trigger finger. Then, silence. The canyon emptied of sound like a bottle turned over. Smoke hung low, broken only by the echo of a final gunshot that had no answer. Elias stepped into the clearing again, alone this time. He walked slowly, boots crunching on the gravel. Blood stained the cuff of his sleeve. A thin scratch ran from jaw to collarbone, but he walked like a man not yet ready to fall. The boy cried out as Elias approached, eyes wide with disbelief. You came. Elias crouched, pulled his knife, and cut the ropes. You're safe now, he said quietly, helping the boy to his feet. But before the boy could answer, a voice snapped through the haze. Not yet. Caleb Dorsey stepped out from behind a boulder. His pistols were drawn, smoke still curling from one barrel. His face was flushed with rage, and blood ran down one leg where a splinter of rock had gashed him during the fight. I killed your wife, he said. And your boy. You remember that. Elias froze. The wind paused, as if the earth itself needed to hear. I remember, Elias said, his voice hollow. Thought I recognized those eyes back in Deadwood. Dorsey continued, walking slow, pistol steady. Never thought I'd see the mountain ghost face to face. Elias stepped between Dorsey and the boy. You'll see more than my face, he whispered. And then, no words, no warnings, both men moved. The first shot cracked like lightning. The canyon held its breath again. The gunfire cracked, and Elias pulled the boy behind him just as the bullet sliced past his cheek. Caleb Dorsey stood his ground 10 paces away, both pistols raised, smoke curling from their mouths like serpents let loose. The moment locked in Elias's gut, not just from danger, but memory. That face, that voice, that scar above the right brow. And then it struck him. Not just a threat. Not just another outlaw. Caleb Dorsey was the man he'd hunted years ago, the man who'd worn Union blue until bloodlust overtook duty. The man who led raiders through the Missouri border like a plague. The man who burned Elias's cabin. Who left his wife and boy in ash and silence. Elias had searched for years before giving up the chase and letting the mountain swallow his rage. Now here he stood, alive and sneering. "I see it in your eyes now," Dorsey said, a cruel grin breaking across his jaw. "Thought that fire had burned out of you, Boone." Elias raised his rifle, hands trembling, heart pounding, vision narrowing to a tunnel. Just Dorsey's face, that sneer, that ghost from the firelight of his nightmares. He pulled the trigger. The shot went wide. Not by much, but enough to miss its mark. Dorsey's laughter echoed like shovels hitting grave dirt. "You're slower now. I guess ghosts get old, too." From the canyon walls came the sudden scramble of boots. 2 outlaws, the last survivors of the gang, surged forward, one from the left ridge, the other cutting low through brush. Elias cursed under breath, dragging the boy with him toward a shelf of rock. Bullets struck stone, sending splinters flying. The boy screamed. Elias shoved him behind a slab and rolled down the embankment, rifle clenched, teeth gritted. Blood pounded in his ears. Another shot rang out, missed. He slid into cover behind a sandstone ridge, breathing hard. Dorsey's men fanned out, using the terrain. The canyon became a trap turned inside out. Elias closed his eyes a second, mind racing. Then he moved. He tossed a stone to the left. As it struck gravel, one outlaw turned instinctively, and Elias fired a ricochet off a rusted shovel buried in the dirt. The bullet arced, striking the man's thigh. He dropped with a howl, gun spinning out of his grip. Another outlaw fired wildly toward the sound, unaware that Elias was already gone, slithering like a coyote through the brush. His rifle was low, steps measured, breath held between moments. Dust. He needed dust. He grabbed a handful of dry earth and flung it into the air. A breeze carried it across the canyon mouth, forming a drifting veil. The next bullet that came missed by a foot. Elias used the cover to climb higher. Beneath a fallen log he'd passed an hour earlier, he pulled a wire trigger. A trap sprang. A snare looped from the scrub and yanked the second outlaw's ankle, hauling him backward into a cluster of thorn brush. He screamed, tangled and bleeding, as Elias turned and planted a shot through his shoulder, ending the fight. Only Dorsey remained. But Dorsey was no longer grinning. He stood near the boy, pistols up, eyes narrowed. "You're clever, Boone. I'll give you that." Elias emerged from behind the stone, rifle cradled, breath heavy. "You killed my family, Dorsey," he said. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. "I buried my past in the mountains. Tonight, I dig it up." Dorsey spat. "Don't flatter yourself. You think you were the only one who lost something in the war." "I didn't lose them to war," Elias said. "I lost them to you." "Then come get your revenge," Dorsey said, raising his pistols. "Let's finish this." Elias stepped forward. Slowly. His boots touched the edge of shadow, gun steady, finger curled. But he didn't see the movement. A shimmer of heat to his left. A flash of silver. Dorsey had set a man aside, one last loyal dog, hidden behind a pile of debris. The man fired from the side. The bullet tore through Elias's shoulder. He staggered. His rifle slipped. The canyon spun for a second as pain burst like fire down his arm. He dropped to one knee. Dorsey barked with laughter. "So much for legends." Elias gasped, blood soaking through linen. He reached for the rifle but faltered. Behind Dorsey, the boy screamed. Caleb grabbed him by the collar and hauled him to his knees. One pistol pressed to the boy's head. The child kicked, flailed, but he was too small, too weak. Dorsey aimed the second pistol at Elias. "You took my man. You humiliated me. But you'll die knowing you couldn't save him." Elias looked up, vision swimming. The dust settled. Time slowed. Blood dripped from his sleeve onto the stones. He gritted his teeth, pulled his arm back toward the rifle stock. Pain lit his spine like lightning. His fingers brushed the trigger. The boy whimpered. Dorsey smirked. Say goodbye, trapper. The wind howled through the canyon like an old, bitter spirit, tearing through the silence that followed Dorsey's threat. Dust whipped across Elias's face as he pressed his bleeding shoulder against the jagged rock. His vision blurred. The world trembled. But his hand found a rifle. 500 yards. That's what lay between him and the devil with a pistol pressed to a boy's skull. The devil who'd taken his family. The devil who thought he'd already won. Elias Boone dragged the rifle up the stone like a man hauling the weight of every grave he'd ever stood over. Blood slicked the grip, his fingers numb, breath rattling in his throat. He tasted iron, heard his own pulse pounding like war drums in his ears. Across the canyon, Dorsey laughed. "You got nothing left, old man," he shouted, knuckles white on the boy's collar. "Ain't a man alive can make that shot. Not with one arm dead and blood leaking like rain." The boy squirmed, face smeared with tears and dirt. The pistol didn't move. Elias didn't answer. He laid the stock in the notch of the rock, sighting down the line. The rifle's barrel trembled. He clenched his teeth and stilled it. The wind pushed at him like a bully at a funeral. He adjusted, accounted for drift. The sun struck metal far downrange, Dorsey's pistol catching light. 500 yards. One bullet. His lungs screamed. His arm burned. His body begged him to fall, to give up, to let the world turn without him one last time. But he whispered, "One last shot, for them, and for me." He slowed his breath. Everything else disappeared. The wind, the pain, the dust, the canyon. There was only the target. His finger curled. Time stopped. The trigger broke. The shot rang out, not loud, but clean. Pure. Like a bell tolling across a graveyard at dawn. And the world held its breath. The bullet spun through air carved with heat and dust, slicing the distance like a memory finally spoken aloud. A blackbird rose from the rocks, startled. The boy closed his eyes. The bullet struck. Dead center. Dorsey jerked. No scream. No stagger. Just a brief look of confusion, as if fate had stolen something from his pocket and walked off without a word. His pistol dropped. His knees buckled. He hit the dirt like a marionette with its strings cut, dead before his shadow did. The boy collapsed to the ground, free. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then the last two gang members ran. Not a glance back. No words. Just fear and boots on gravel as the canyon spat them out like it wanted nothing more to do with them. Across the battlefield, Elias slumped against the rock. The rifle slid from his grasp. He smiled, faintly. The ache was gone now, as if the shot had carried it with it. Steps came fast. Hands on his face, warm and trembling. Rebecca. Her shawl flew behind her like wings as she knelt beside him, voice cracking. "Elias. Elias, stay with me." He blinked, the blue of the sky behind her blurred and brilliant. "Reckon," he murmured, blood painting his side. "Reckon the old gun still had one more story in it." She laughed and wept in the same breath, pressed her hand to the wound. "You're not dying here. Not today." He coughed, but his eyes held that same mountain steel. Wasn't about living, Rebecca. It was about finishing the chapter. The boy crawled to him, hand shaking. "You saved me." Elias looked at him. "Your ma, she raised you strong." The sheriff arrived moments later, rifle in hand, hat off his head. He looked at the scene, Dorsey's body, the scattered men, the snare-torn trails, the silent rifle. He let out a long breath. "You did it, Boone," he said. "You finished it." Elias didn't answer. His eyes were closed now, chest rising soft. The wind calmed. The sun warmed the canyon floor. Rebecca whispered, "Rest. Just rest." Later, when the story traveled, and it did, faster than any horse, they said the canyon itself still held the echo of that shot, that it was carved into the stones, in the silence between pine needles. They said a man stood between evil and innocence, wounded and weary, and proved that legend ain't in the rifle. It's in the man who holds it. The townsfolk never forgot. Children carve his name into fence posts. The boy he saved grew into a man who told the tale with reverence and tears. And every now and then, someone new would come to Deadwood Gulch and ask what happened in that canyon. And an old voice would answer, quiet as a prayer. Gang challenged the trapper, but his marksmanship was legendary.